Hello and thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, the podcast where we discuss cybercrimes and cybersecurity news. My name is Chloe Tonis, and today we are going to be discussing a rather high-profile case that my non-security friends have been sending me. A giant password data breach for billions of different accounts on Google, Facebook, Apple, bank accounts, GitHub, and many more websites. Catastrophic, largest password leak ever. Or is it? Cybersecurity researchers at Cyber News uncovered multiple different databases on the internet containing billions of login credentials for all sorts of online sites. Corporate sites, social media platforms, development websites, and code repositories. In total, 30 massive databases contained 16 billion, with a B, credentials. Cyber News claims that although some of them were used prior, most of it appeared to be brand new data. I say they claimed this because we can't really prove that it was new data. Why is that? Well, the datasets are not currently available to the general public and were likely exposed completely unintentionally by the threat actors responsible themselves, who are yet to be identified. They were temporarily available in improperly locked down Elasticsearch databases. Fast enough for researchers scraping the web to find them, but not fast enough for anyone to save them and analyze the copies to see what credentials are in there. Do they already exist somewhere on the internet? So the good news is these credentials aren't going to be widely used and exploited by every threat actor. The bad news is someone is controlling them. We don't know what they're doing. Are they selling them in small batches, using them to launch attacks on corporations? Are they even new passwords? There's a lot we just don't know. So, how much do we have to worry about this exactly? Sources are rather mixed on how much of the data is actually anything new. According to Bleeping Computer, many of the databases were actually thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands, of already compromised passwords that already existed in other datasets. Before I elaborate any further, we need to talk about info stealers. An info stealer is a type of malware that steals information. This is a pretty common malware type, especially for passwords. Info stealers can steal passwords directly from the machine or from password managers in browsers. This is becoming a lot more common as browsers are a huge attack vector. You should still use a password manager, by the way, because it enables you to make highly secure passwords with no memorization or effort involved, but ideally use one that's not your web browser. A solution like Bitwarden or 1Pass can be used, and have your passwords locked behind another password, making them more difficult to access, and unless the hacker knows your master password somehow, inaccessible for their info stealer to take. Now that we've covered info stealers, much of the dataset contains passwords harvested using info stealers, and something new hackers do to try to gain some notoriety is release some password datasets online for free, either solely for the reputation points, or to accompany a full password database that is being sold to prove that they indeed managed to steal legitimate credentials. These lists aren't usually very small either. They can be tens of thousands of individual credential pairs long. Because we don't have full access to the database, it's difficult to tell whether or not this really is a brand new, never-before-seen credential leak, or just mostly old recycled data. There haven't been any super recent breaches from Google to indicate where this new data would come from, and the same is the case with Meta, also known as Facebook, and Apple. Neither of them have had a very recent data breach, but many news organizations are now falsely claiming that they were breached, and that this data was leaked, and that's what made up this massive password dataset, when that's not verifiably true at all. In my opinion, it's hard to say, but I'm leaning more towards much of this data was recycled, because password lists honestly very frequently get recycled. I've seen a lot of password data dumps that were allegedly brand new data, but turned out it was just recycled old passwords. There could be some new ones in there, we're just not sure because we can't see the databases. So, I think this story was a bit overhyped, but if you still feel uneasy and want to know what you can do to make sure you're safe, just in case it turns out this data is all brand new and I am wrong, what can you do? Multi-factor authentication is something I preach often, but you should have it on for every site you have an account for and want protected. Multi-factor authentication is setting a second factor that allows you to authenticate or prove your identity to a website before you are allowed to log in and access your account. A password factor is something you know, because you said it, you know your password. But other factors include something you have, like a physical key card to access parts of a building, your phone to answer an SMS text message with a code in it, or a temporary token used in an authenticator app. Or another common one is something you are, a biometric factor like your fingerprint scan or your face scan. Using an authenticator app like Microsoft or Google Authenticator to set up your second factor, the hackers will have a much more difficult time logging into your account because it's a lot harder to get that second factor, especially if it's a time-based one-time password. Those can't really be leaked in the same way that a regular password can, and even if they are, it's incredibly time-sensitive and really difficult to log in that fast. Of course, you can also rotate your passwords, and you should if you're concerned it's been breached. If you have a password manager, it will tell you which accounts have been breached and alert you to change your password, which is super convenient. You can also choose to rotate your passwords, but for Google, Apple, and Facebook, there is a better way, and hopefully this is the way for many more options in the future. That is passkeys. I want to see the death of passwords and the embracing of passkeys, so what the heck is a passkey? A passkey allows you to log in without a password by using cryptographic key pairs that are saved to your device. When you log on from your computer or your phone, the website recognizes the passkey saved in a special area of your computer for storing cryptographic keys, and it logs you in. Google, Facebook, Meta, and Apple all support passkeys. You can also store passkeys in a password manager like a typical password. And if you don't use one, many of these services themselves will automatically sync your passkeys with your devices, using things like Google Cloud or Apple Keychain. You can also manually share your passkeys with another device, usually by scanning a QR code or through Bluetooth. If you have a Google, Meta, or Apple account, there are guides on all of our websites on how to set up passkeys if that's something that you think you may want to try. I personally enable passkeys on my Google account, and I find it's pretty seamless and works great. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, and another thanks to Cyber News, Bleeping Computers, ZDNet, and Forbes for information on this data breach. At least the little information we know and might possibly know. This was a complicated topic to cover today. Anyways, until next time, enable passkeys and stay secure.